Morris.
Okay, good morning. I see Raymond and Alaji Tanko. I'm going to, okay, let me allow Sir to talk. Tanko has gone off. Hello, Raymond.
Fariza, so I think what we can do is to let everybody try to talk with the video, and then we can let everybody do a presentation. So we can pick them one after the other.
Yeah.
They do the talk with the video, and then is everybody doing a presentation?
No. So I would select those who are supposed to do the video.
Okay.
David, I'm calling you shortly.
All right, sure.
I informed Dr. Akoche to join the link. She's not picking up. Please, are you able to just prompt her for me? No. We No, we didn't conclude on that. So I've spoken to Dr. Kuti. We didn't conclude on that. So, I mean, obviously, we cannot just come like that. We would have to do some talking.
Hello, Alaji Tanko. Can you speak? Also turn on your video so that we can see you. Hello, sir. Please, can you hear me? Great. Can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you turn on your video?
Yeah, the video is on, and then they are muted, so we can see them and we can hear them.
Great.
So can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. David, can you see him?
Yes, I can.
Great. MFA. So say I'm going to take you off right now and test with MFA as well.
Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, MFA. Hello, MFA.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So MFA, you've been made a co-organizer. You would have to mute and unmute yourself. So right now you are muted until you mute yourself. Thank you.
So I've just tried it. I was able to mute and unmute.
Great. Let me do same for Tanko. All right. Okay, so MFA, you may want to mute yourself now. It's not time yet, but thank you everyone who has already joined. We'll go live at 10, so please just indulge us whilst we wait for other people to join and we'll start.
Good morning. Coming out the wrong side. I thought not a echo.
David, we can hear you. Can you mute
Hey,
yourself? Yes.
what's it going on? But what can there? No. But hold on, my hold on.
Hello, good morning, Dr. Asante. Please, can you hear us? Hello. Okay, let me try with Dr. Akwete. Yeah. Good morning, Dr. Akwete. Please, can you hear me? Hello, good morning, Dr. Akwete. Uh,
Hello.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Great. We can
You
hear you
haven't
now.
introduced yourself.
Please, my name is Feruza Salisu. I work with Star Ghana Foundation.
Feruza, it's you.
Yes, sir.
My dear, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. We are just testing to see if your mic and your camera works before we start.
Yeah, I'm not picking your voice. Initially, it wasn't so. It didn't have that beat, you see. But now it's clear. It's you. I can witness.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yes.
Is it the same link people will click to join?
Yes, please. Which link?
The registration link.
When you register, a link will be sent. Hi, good morning, Esther. Good morning, Esther. Please, can you hear me? Hello, Esther. Okay. Raymond, please, can you hear me? So, Esther, can you please unmute yourself and speak?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Great. Yes, I can hear you. Can you also turn on your camera briefly? If you are okay with that, yes.
Okay, can you see me?
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Raymond, please, can you hear me?
Please, are you still adding those live to the Facebook admin?
Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, good morning, and welcome to today's webinar. We are 71 days away from election 2024. Like other elections, is an essential ingredient for democratic governance. And at a crucial time such as this, we are convening on civil society and elections in Ghana to essentially take stock of our role as far as civil society organizations in Ghana are concerned. And we know that CSOs in Ghana have undoubtedly played critical roles in achieving credible, peaceful, and inclusive elections since the advent of the Fourth Republic in 1992. We've been mediating conflicts, there have been public education on our part, election observations, just to name a few. And we've also witnessed some avoidable violence. And so we gathered today to brainstorm on what more can be done, how it should be done, and also ask ourselves why some things have not been done. I am Emefa Apau, and I represent your election headquarters, which is Joy News, and it's my expectation that as your moderator for today, at the end of today's conversations, we would have, some way forward in terms of how CSOs will gain a better understanding of effective strategies and best practices for election-related programming, as well as also enhancing their skills in areas such as election monitoring, amongst others. Later on in this session, we'll have some breakout sessions, which will focus on 4 key areas. I'll take you through them later, but will largely focus on manifestos, inclusivity, amongst others. And my IT team will be on hand to provide direction in that regard. And I would respectfully ask that we make my work easy by muting our microphones, at least it's being controlled. But at this point, I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors. This webinar is organized by CSO's platform on elections and Star Ghana Foundation with support from the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. In this particular webinar, we have a number of participants. We have CSOs, of course, from elections platforms. We have officials from Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. We have members of the academia, UN agencies, development partners, security services and agencies as well. Of course, my colleagues in the media are also here, and Star Ghana, of course, is steering this committee members, and they are also here, the national and sub-national CSOs. We have political parties represented, MPs as well, and of course, we have you. You're all welcome once again. At this point, let's set the tone for today's conversation, and we'll start on the theme towards peaceful, inclusive elections, lessons from CSO's experience. And I have the pleasure of inviting the Executive Director, Star Ghana Foundation, Mr. Ibrahim Tanko Amidu. Over to you, sir. I'm sure the team will give the opportunity to Mr. Tanko to speak at this point.
Thank you very much, Emefa. Always a pleasure working with you on these issues. Good morning to everyone on the... Okay. Sorry again for the hitch. I hope you can hear me this time.
Yes, we can.
Once again, good morning, Emefa. Always a pleasure working with you on these issues. Good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for joining this conversation. As somebody told me yesterday, this is a conversation that should have been had much earlier, but we haven't had elections yet, so I think it's not too late to discuss, harvest some lessons, and to see how we can improve the effectiveness of our actions towards peaceful, credible, transparent elections and a peaceful transition post the voting. Civil society engagement with Ghana's politics and Ghana's elections, has been a constant feature since the advent of the Fourth Republic in 1992. These engagements deepened, from around 2012 when the then Star Ghana program started providing, support to diverse civil society organizations to undertake actions aimed at ensuring peaceful, credible, and transparent elections and a credible transition. The work that Star Ghana introduced from 2012 has been to enable as many close community-based organizations as possible to participate in the processes of ensuring peaceful and credible elections. It also supported a more joined-up process where local level actors are able to connect with national level actors to ensure, more effective actions. And of course, facilitating the engagements between state and non-state actors towards the elections. The actions that civil society organizations have undertaken have been diverse, and a lot of activities were undertaken, from voter education, from monitoring, from engaging with security services on peaceful elections, to facilitating the transitions post the elections. And a number of lessons have come up that I think we will discuss. We think that these lessons provide good practices. Good practices are always contextual, and therefore we're not saying that these are one size fits all, but these are good practices that we can keep in mind. But some of the issues that came up from our actions as civil society organizations, I've categorized a few. There are many, but I'll just mention a few because of time. And then when we go into the breakout discussions, we can unpack them. One, and these are not in order of importance. One has been the credibility and effectiveness of the election management body, that is the Electoral Commission. Since 1992, there has always been that perception about the EC favoring one or the other of the contestants in the elections. And that perception, that lack of trust, then runs through every aspect of the process of the elections, heightening tensions, leading to conflicts, etc. So the whole issue around how people are appointed to the Electoral Commission, how the Electoral Commission itself functions, and then the quality of its engagement with citizens, voters, and other stakeholders is one of the key issues that we've picked up. The second, the issue of the credibility of the register. Every election cycle, we go through that, from let my vote counts to other iterations of it, depending on who is in power and etc. And that again has always been a flashpoint for the lack of trust in the results, the process, and etc. A third has been the quality of campaigning. The campaigns are usually characterized by insults, by prominent people making very incendiary remarks that risk pushing the country into conflicts. That the spaces for citizens' engagement in fashioning the manifestos and etc. has always been quite limited. And then of course, even just fact checking what's being said, how realistic the promises are, has also been part of the issue when it comes to the quality of the campaigning. Then we have election-related corruption, vote buying, abuse of incumbency, etc. that tend to corrupt the process, that tend to give unfair advantages to one or the other of the contestants, and then to call into question the credibility and fairness of the election. Two other issues. One, peace and security. The issue of political vigilantism is one that we are all aware of, that even an act has been passed to try and check it. The effectiveness or otherwise of it is something that we can interrogate today. The issue of the lack of trust by sections of the populace, of the voting public, of stakeholders in the security agencies, is also one that has come up repeatedly and has risked, compromised the effectiveness of security actions to ensure peace and security. Then I would mention the issue of the inclusivity, so to speak, of the process. How inclusive has our election process been? That people are excluded through filing fees, through the cost of campaigning, that a significant section of the populace is disbarred from exercising these rights because of the issue of money. The issue of how the process is accessible to persons with disability has come up. Significant progress has been made, but there are still lots of issues, lots of challenges when it comes to the access to the whole election process to persons living with disability. Then the issue of youth and women, their representation in, even our parliament, is testimony of the significant barriers that they face being able to participate as equal participants in this process. The declaration, the voting process itself, the declaration of results, how do we ensure that it's transparent? How do we ensure that it's credible? How do we ensure that it doesn't become a flashpoint for violence, that everybody sees that I have to declare my results, and if it is not the results that I expected, then it is not credible. So this, as I said, is not an exhaustive list of the issues that have come up. I just flag up for you some of those that have come up. I think that during the breakout discussions, we will be diving deep into 4 of the areas that we think are quite critical around ensuring peace and security, the transparency and credibility of the voting process, the inclusivity of the whole process, and then how citizens can influence the manifestos to ensure that they are inclusive, they address the issues and the concerns of the most marginalized and disadvantaged sections of our population. So these are kind of the key issues that we are flagging up that we hope we'll discuss. I think on behalf of the elections platform and on behalf of the Star Ghana Foundation, we're looking forward to very constructive discussions that will throw up lessons, recommendations to improve our elections, not just for 2024, but beyond. And that at the end of the day, Ghana will be the better for it, and that we all live in, and that the elections would create the enabling environment for all of us to thrive as citizens, for our nation to develop. So thank you very much once again for this opportunity. Thank you.
We're indeed grateful. Mr. Ibrahim Tanko Amidu, thank you so much. That's Executive Director, Star Ghana Foundation. And I must acknowledge there are over 100 participants online currently, representing CSOs across Ghana, the media, academia, and our development partners. And I'd particularly like to acknowledge the presence of Professor Akila Kwasoya. We're grateful that you're able to join us. Also, all the members of the CSOs election platform, NetRight, CDD, IDEC, Imani Ghana, Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, ONEP, Media Foundation for West Africa. We are grateful that you're all able to join us. Let's now focus on elections observation, the best practices in monitoring electoral processes. And to guide us through that is the Director for Policy Engagements and Partnerships, the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD. Let's welcome Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante. If you're ready, we are in your hands, Dr. Asante.
Hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. A pleasure to be with all of you, and very, very good morning. I think for CDD, promoting electoral integrity, it's not only part of our mandate, but also part of our theory of change. For us, we are seeking a free, peaceful, well-governed democracies in all of Africa, of course, and Ghana. And the key pillar of that, of course, is free and fair elections. At the start of the Fourth Republic, the key concern for CDD and the founders of CDD was to see that the fourth attempt at trying to entrench the democracy really gain roots. And a key focus of that was the institutionalization of key democratic institutions like the Electoral Commission and other institutions like that. And so right from the beginning, the investment of CDD was to make sure that institutions or the electoral management bodies like the Electoral Commission was well capacitated, was competent enough, to deliver on free and fair elections. But more importantly, also to make sure that there were complementary institutions, non-state institutions, to monitor the work of the Electoral Commission. And that motivated the setup of the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers. And this was, citizen groups that were focused on complementing the work of the Electoral Commission, but also serving as a watchdog of electoral integrity, making sure that the Electoral Commission was delivering on its mandate. Now, the CODEO that was set up was made up of a wide range of civil society actors across the country. So you had professional bodies like the accountants, the teachers, the civil servants, and so on, religious groups, Christian, Muslim, you had student groups, you had youth groups, you had women groups, all across the length and breadth of the country, so that you can have a broad range of citizens participating in the core function of governance, like elections. And CODEO started with about 20 or so, or 18 or so members. Now, currently, it's about 42 members in 2000. And since then, it has observed every single election, every single local government election, by-election, and so on and so forth. Now, we started in terms of our methodology, using purposive, sampling, basically determining where we thought were going to be difficult areas and sending people, or competitive areas, and sending people to go and collect information, and manually trying to estimate what exactly had happened in those areas, and drawing conclusions. And for the first couple of elections from 2000 to 2004, that was the approach. It was not as systematic. It was very purposive. And even though we deployed very large numbers, in 2004, for example, we deployed about 8,000 observers to all across the country, and we were doing these kinds of assessments. We did introduce new innovations even around that time. In 2004, for example, we developed a new instrument to track abuse of incumbency for the first time, and other things like monitoring media bias and all of that. But in 2008, that changed. We partnered with the National Democratic Institute, the US, to deploy the parallel vote tabulation, which for the first time gave us a new tool on election day to be a lot more systematic in our observation processes. It allowed us to be able to estimate, both in terms of the process and the results of the election day processes. So we could look at nationally, using statistics, sample across the country to be able to make pronouncement on exactly how the processes of the Electoral Commission has gone, the quality of it has gone on the day, and to be able to also pronounce on the results. So we could tell how the deployment of materials, for example, has gone, how the setup has been done across the country. We could also determine how the voting processes have been adhered to, and so on and so forth across the country. And that allowed us to really be able to be more accurate and also to have the capacity to estimate across the country. And so that's changed the way observation has gone in the last, because observers couldn't, unless you are deploying across the 40,000 or so polling stations, you couldn't pronounce on the results. And now you can do that using statistical sampling and SMS technology, which also gives you speed to be able to do that. So that's changed. And we've also developed other technologies, I think, over the period, even developing tools for tracking vote buying, for instance, and all of that. So I think one thing I can say is that there's more and more, the observation process has become more professional, because the institutions that also support observation are institutions that are engaged in the day-to-day work of research, analysis, and so on. And they improve on these processes as time goes on. I would say going forward, for me, the key issues are really in the pre-election environment. And there are a lot of things that we have not still taken a serious look at, particularly around fair competition, particularly looking at things like abuse of incumbency, vote buying, just the environment for allowing for competition. And I think that's an area that sometimes we gloss over, but it has an impact on being able to have credible and free elections. We also have to, and I think Tanko said, raised that issue about the voter register. How do we get over this periodic, process of contestations around the accuracy of the voter register? We need to deal with that. And then basically, voter education and all of those things that really should be very systematic and ongoing, and doesn't have to only come when we have elections. So there are some of these issues which I think has been raised mostly around the pre-election environment and also the EMB governance issue. How do we make the EMB independent? What model of independence are we going to have? That we can all say that when we say the EMB is independent, this is how we compose it, and so on. I think those are issues that are still outstanding that we need to address. But let me stop there. I'm sure there will be questions. Thank you.
Yes, we definitely have a number of questions, but we'll leave that for now. And then when we get into, after all the sub-theme presentations, then we can actually take all the questions that we have. I have a few of my own and that I would like to put forward, but let me hold it there for now. And then we get into our very next presentation for today. And I'll have the pleasure also now to invite to give us the next submission on peace and security, violence prevention, strategies for promoting violence-free elections. Please make welcome the Executive Director, Institute for Democratic Governance, IDEG, Dr. Emmanuel Akwete. Yes, we are preparing for Dr. Akwete. Can you hear me, Doc? Well, Kojo, whilst I get Doc to come on, I'm sure the team is getting him to be able to give us his presentation on peace and security. But maybe a few clarifications that you can give to us, Doc, if you can still hear me. The issue about tracking vote buying, I'm particularly interested. Let's talk a bit about what has been found and what exactly is our expectation on what can be done to actually stop what it is that you found. Did you also, Dr. Asante?
Who did not know that vote buying was a crime. Because they are so used to taking money to go and vote that they thought it was just normal. And when you show them, then there's a certain realization that they they have been engaged in a criminal activity. So I think we just haven't taken it seriously and having had a conversation about it. But I think maybe in the recent times when the OSP and things have been involved, people have become more and more aware. But if we took it seriously, I think a lot more people may feel deterred from those kinds of acts.
And the voter roll contestations, this is where we are now. And we've spoken extensively about it. But over the period, like Tanko said, there have been voter roll concerns over the period, at least as far back as he can recall. And I'm sure that Tanko will also have his turn on this. But the contestations and resolutions over the period, is it the case that we have not been able to resolve it such that every year in and year out during an election period, we have this issue come up?
We thought we had cured the problem at the last post-election workshop. I was convinced that we had, because we had the National Identification Authority there, we had the EC there, we had everybody there, and the agreement was that we could even provide some field within the NIA process database, I think polling station, so that we could almost absorb the data of the Electoral Commission in the NIA data as well, so that when you do, you can also add your polling station, and so we can have this continuous registration process. And then I think we got caught up in the issue about when basically we should cut off the other ways in which you can register, and we couldn't resolve that in Parliament, and then we couldn't deal with the guarantee system. So I think if we could address that in between elections, I think waiting to sort that out in an election year or close to election become a problem. If in the next 2 years after this election, we can resolve all of those matters, it makes the tension goes down. We can address all of that, and then we put it on the side. And by the time we get to the election, we wouldn't have this kinds of problem. But the solution is there. We just have to commit the time and resources to deal with it. But it also means that the NIA has to understand that it is now not just a government agency. It has to be an independent agency, and all the parties have to have trust in it because of the role that it is now going to play in terms of serving as a database for even our election register. Basically, it's going to be a source for our election register. So it cannot run like any other agency anymore. So those adjustments have to be made, for us to be able to move forward.
And definitely, your time is up. I'm grateful that you've been able to clarify some of the issues we have. And of course, I know that all the other speakers will have a bite at this. And I would go back to Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, the Executive Director, Institute for Democratic Governance, and would have a presentation on peace and security, violence prevention, strategies for promoting violence-free elections. Dr. Akwete, we are in your hands.
Thank you very much. Hello, do you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I just think Kojo has eaten into my time and I want to claim it back.
Because he was actually helping you, Doc. We're waiting for you, Doc.
And I also observed that there aren't many files on his shelf. There were about 3 I counted. So I think you should note all of that. But thank you for this opportunity. And also for Star Ghana for this initiative. I think the theme is good for us to speak to, because our work in elections has always dealt with peace and security, but also transformation, that which will bring inclusive development into the country. And I would say that though IDEC was in the country from about 1992 and definitely 97, we started our elections work seriously in 2020 when IDEC was established. Earlier, political economy issues, working with TWN and others had preoccupied us. And 2000 elections, we did not play a major role. But in 2004, we started. Then IDEC had been registered. Then come 2008, that is where the first major role in elections took place. And I think we tended to be, because CODEO was doing elections observation and had mobilized a large group of civil society organizations into this process. We looked at what else needs to be done, and would have a critical impact on the election processes. So we shifted our attention on the political and security issues in elections, because when it comes to data registration, voters' behavior, the register, and these problems and so on, CODEO was present, and we tended to draw on what they were saying. But we saw this gap on political and security issues, which we thought was extremely important. So where we started actually, and I think from there on, our identity in the election process, electoral process, became clearly defined, was the 2008 elections. It wasn't like we were idle before 2008. We were focusing more on political economic issues at the national, regional, and global level. So we're very active in, with the AU, in Ghana. We were looking at MDGs and, poverty reduction and NDPC and so on. So we were more on the political economy side of things. But when we entered in 2008, what we first noticed, and we spoke to it openly, that something had changed about our politics. The background to this was more external. Kenyan elections and the violence of 2007. And that really drew a lot of attention to whether such things could also happen in other countries. And in Ghana, President Kufuor led in intervening in the Kenyan situation. Of course, the late statesman Kofi Annan was also there. So Ghana's elections and so on then was also put on the spotlight. And we took interest in that. So we designed this program that said we wanted to see how elections would also strengthen us, give us not only peaceful elections, but it would be credible, we would avoid the violence, and then we will be able to also rank as one of the foremost. So we were really interested in elections that would strengthen our nation building, and that would also bring about transformation. But each of them, we've kept to these things, but we looked at what was happening within that context. And in 2008, therefore, where we thought we could complement the election observation, which is where we felt CODEO gave us the material we needed and we engaged them, was to look at what were the risks and what were the threats we were facing in the country. And in that case, who was responding to them and what was the vacuum that we could fill. So our project then started looking at these matters to the extent that we were interested in the work of the judiciary, we were interested in the work of the police, we were interested in the work of the National Peace Council had then been formed, the EC itself we were engaging, and then the parties. But it led us to also regroup certain sections of civil society to focus on these issues and not just elections observation, the interventions that we could make. And I think it was quite an experience because we came out at the end of the day using terms that were different from just election observation. We started saying that the behavior of the two parties had evolved to a point where we were looking at them as duopolies, which meant that these are very powerful parties. 2008, both parties had 2 terms. And as we looked at the campaign, it was different from what I saw in 2000 and 2004. And the threats, the language, Ghana could become like Kenya, and they were threatening each other over register and so on. So we said, hey, how do we deal with these things? It's not just an election observation issue. It is really matters that ought to be handled so that we don't go through violence. And out of that, we formed the CFI, drawing on members of CODEO as well as those who were not part, with military, retired military officers and so on, who could, and police officers who could tell us what is happening. So our critical things we did then was that the police had to tell us how they were going to deal with issues in the elections and prevent violence. We brought in the Chief Justice. It was at one of the meetings that the manual for elections dispute resolution, the presidential elections, was introduced. The First Lady Chief Justice did that on that platform. It was their first time to even be in elections. But we also did, it wasn't just an introduction of the manual. We persuaded or convinced them that as judiciary, they ought to also speak on the election issues and guide us in a way that people would have confidence in the system, that there is a place to go for justice. So we got all these things on the various platforms, and we engaged the EC as well. You know, we got the biometric register, new, and so on, eventually in 2012. But before then, we were drawing attention to the violence, the threat, the lack of control, and the lack of systems in place that were addressing these issues. So we complemented CODEO to the extent that CFI, IDEC CFI, and CODEO in elections would, with their leaders, Professor Greenstreet and others who come to IDEC, they'll brief us what is happening with the parallel tabular, what's it called? CODEO, you can, pardon? Parallel with a tabulation. They would, it is a confidential thing, but they'll brief us. And we would also brief them on the political and security issues for which the CFI was leading, with the retired Army General leading it, and so on and so forth. So that was it. But when it came to elections then, in terms of elections observation and so on, we set up situation rooms, as we call it. We introduced it, although later on others were claiming it globally, that it was a situation room. We took the idea from CNN and brought under the CFI, the missions, the church groups, Christian, Muslim, Ahmadiyya, professional TUC, and so on. And we used their structures to open observation points throughout the country to monitor the elections, but also to engage the authorities where there was violence at the regional level or district level. They would act. They would tell us what is happening in Accra. We will contact police headquarters, and locally they would solve some of these issues. So it was very complementary. At the end of the day, I think what our intervention was that it made us not just look at elections and who won and whether it's credible or not, but we also saw the emerging challenges in our democracy and the threats that were being posed by the kind of elections we saw. From the two parties, the smaller parties pushed aside, they all seemed to have foot soldiers, then they were not called vigilantes, and the threats they posed to the whole system, and what is there to be done about it. So after the votes, you know, there was a third round. The second round was easy, but the third round was so threatening, and we had people from situation rooms all across the country, some crying, some calling for help. We were quite helpless, but it led to convening the Peace Council under Cardinal Texas. They were not even set up fully, no office, whatever, and so on. And we had to work with them in the period towards the counting of the second ballot, presidential elections, and declaring the winner, which then led us to the third. And overnight, because the theme had talked about security, peace and security, you know, it was squarely what we're doing. But overnight, they went around talking to the presidential candidates. And this is about 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And they also had to talk to Afarijan. And even when Dr. Afarijan said they had set a time to meet to declare who won the second round or whatever would be done, they had to find their own way to get into the meetings of the commission and to make certain views across. So that was the genesis, real first-hand practice of the Peace Council in elections. And after the elections, well, with the results announced and so on, we then said that the duopoly must be recognized. Although some NGOs disagreed and said, what's a duopoly? And so I said, no, two parties have been made. So it shifted our focus on the structure of our election management system, okay, and how it could control two parties that felt they had been in government equally, like we have now in in this year, 2024. They've all done 8 years, second 8 years, and they were above everything. So as we were talking about the need for duopolies to be regulated, because in the economy they are regulated, there was nothing there for the political space. And they were often threatening. So what we saw immediately was the NDC taking over, but you know, the insults and the by-elections were violent. Apetia, Tiwa, Talensi, and so on and so forth. And the mistrust was total in the electoral register. And most times, the Electoral Commission was really pushed to the wall, and they're making demands that couldn't be made. But as we moved towards about introducing a biometric register, which the president at the time told the UN he would do everything for peaceful elections in Ghana, we were also instrumental in that. We brought the Nigerian Electoral Commission, or the chair of the commission, to also explain how biometric and so on and so forth. But indeed, it made us rethink the design that we had for the 2012 elections. And that is how the Peace Council came up, because the threats were real from these two parties and the two camps. And the state appeared weak, and CSOs, well, were looking at credible elections in terms of registration and register and so on. But the security threats were clear. So we had to find a way to bring the Peace Council in, equip them. A new chairman had taken over, Reverend Dr. Asante, then head of the, the bishop, the Methodist Church. We engaged him and others, brother chiefs and so on, approached Otumfuo and so on a very simple principle, which said that all of the party leaders had gone to Otumfuo, and we had this evidence about their campaign, and he has wise words for them. So we said we needed somebody who could convene them, all of them, and they will respect that convening and go. That's how we went to Asante Hine with the Peace Council chair and so on. And then we saw the first peace pact, which was then, its function was simple. If you contest the presidential election, the parliamentary, or whatever it is, you should go to court. You can't say you are not going to court and you are now mobilizing young people and arming them and so on. And impunity to electoral violence was almost absolute. We have not had any trial of people who perpetrated violence in elections before the 2012 and even since the 2012. And when we found out, we asked the police why. They said their documents, they did the investigation. Sometimes they don't have the evidence, but where they had the evidence, it was the Attorney General that should handle it. And if Attorney General is not getting back to them, nothing happens. So the impunity was quite serious. So we needed a peace pact as a tool to drive them to court. And the Chief Justice played a certain role. But also we did a national service, a national summit, which mobilized CSOs, chiefs, and business people and all that. And they also insisted that you go to court and the outcome of the court case, the decision, the judgment given, ought to be respected and we move on, not violence. And these were processes, these mechanisms helped in us going through the 2012 elections and the subsequent adjudication. But Peace Pact then became a tool for driving parties to court, to go to court for their cases. And as you would see, in 2016, we tried to do that again. We had the peace pact signed, but it wasn't, I think the 2012 elections had really had an impact on the need to go to court. So those processes went through, and we were very instrumental in the debate that came, which led to the pink sheets thing, pasted everywhere, and small parties cannot be banned, they could be strengthened, and so on. So for us, the peace, security, and the violence that had to be dealt with were key to our election work. And I think I'm just wrapping it up. And so the aspect that had become so crucial and we are still pushing is that we were preoccupied with the issue, we've been preoccupied with the issue of the drone police and their behavior. Since 2012, our minority parties, although the contest elections are not in the House, they are so weak to the point that PPP says they would like elections without parties, at least at the local level, because they are more likely to win elections if they are not on a party platform and their individuals are identified for what they do and how they look like, and so on. We've had conversations with all of them, but out of that conversation came the idea that our multi-party democracy, as designed, was structurally at fault, and that we needed reforms until, if we do not open local government, because two duopolies have emerged, and we do not open the system with rules and regulations and institutions and so on, we are not going to get anywhere. And that's, we staged this national big conference and put these ideas and started working on. So the thrust of our work, although we're still doing observation and all that, and we do the peace pact and so on, had also been on the reform of local government, the inclusive government that Sule mentioned, can only come about through structural reforms. We said the system as designed was not for inclusion. It was alternation, and two dual police were not envisaged, but they played the game totally. You capture the state, your president, the whole of this executive arm of government is under your control and your party. The others are out. So how do we do this? It led us bringing publishing what we call democratization of authoritarian local government in Ghana, which would open it up. Let's get Ghanaians parties in, but let us also establish the institutions that will control, regulate parties, fund parties, and so on. So I can share that later. We've distributed many times. So we were changing. We were not just focused on that, and we were working closely with CFI to the extent that by 2017, when the president, MPP, came to power, we had engaged them sufficiently for them to take interest in local government reforms, and they were looking at parties, referendum, and whatever, and then we couldn't go through the referendum. But we kept on pushing to the point that I've just returned from a conference last weekend, where the Ministry for Parliamentary Affairs, the minister, was, I'm just wrapping it, was had to look at the CRC reports and recommendations that are being put forward to reform the system and whatever. And I had to bring up this issue of inclusiveness cannot happen until you open the local government, central government, sorry, the executive arm of government. And that the current system has become dysfunctional, but it was set up as a compromise when it happened the first time. A compromise between the MPP that was coming in 1992, a more liberal democratic, and then the revolutionaries, PNDC, who did not want multi-party, but they had to accept it because of international and internal pressures. But local government was the compromise. It's written really in the reports, and that they felt would be these two systems. We call it a hybrid. And we told them that it's no longer working. And where we've reached, we needed to really reform the executive arm of government and open the system up. So we have a number of proposals that we've set up. Moving forward then, since the 2020 elections, we've still championed this course. And when we met last week, Saturday, would you believe that some of the NDC parliamentarians were even asking for parties? They were talking about mixed member proportional representation in the system to promote inclusiveness. And there were a number of discussions, but you could see the shift But nobody is doing, they themselves do not do this work, like the contributions that we are making. A number of things were ideas we put forward have been accepted. We are looking forward to the next steps, which wasn't too clear, but they said they will get back. So I think for us, the peace, security, violence, preservation, and so on are things that we focused on. We've come up with specific proposals. And the one that was embraced by all of them was the idea that we should have a multi-party democracy and constitutional reform commission. As a state entity, we don't want presidents to come and say, let's reform this article or that. We want a professional body, technical, backed by law, and so on and so forth. That was acceptable to both of them. So on this count,
Did we lose you? Hello, Doc. It does appear that technology found a way to take the time away from Dr. Akwete. Hello, Doc.
we can hear you. Let's move on. It's okay.
Okay. I'm sure that we lost you along the line, but your time is really up. But I would engage again, and we'll definitely come back with a number of questions that we have. I have a few, but I get a sense of collaboration. Also, the issue about the Peace Council versus the Peace Pact and its relevance now, amongst others. I'll come back to you, Doc. But at this point, I would also like to invite your questions and comments. You can leave them with us, and definitely we will get into your questions and answers. But Doc also ended on the inclusivity note, and it takes me to speaking on inclusivity, approaches for ensuring marginalized groups are represented in electoral processes. It's now time to welcome the Executive Director, Gender Center for Empowering Development, West Africa. Madam Esther Teria, over to you, Madam.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I think inclusivity is something that's it's a concern for everybody. And so thank you for what we think are some of the best things that needs to be done so that we make sure that women issues, or I mean, not only women, but all the marginalized group are well represented. And so one of the things that we looked at is how do we make sure that their issues, their concerns get to be at the forefront of conversations. And we've realized that as organizations that represent a constituent, it would be good to be more inclusive also, because sometimes we also forget that we also need to be more open and more inclusive. And so what we tried to do was go around the country and look at the segment of women that we have. We have women in the informal sector, we have women in the formal sector, within the other sectors, where the women, we have women who are also into agriculture, who are interested in other cases like climate change. We have women who are fisher folks. We have women in all sectors of the economy and the country. So we need to have a broader consultation with these women, be able to gather all their thoughts, what they want to see in this year's election. And again, for us, we look at it as their participation, you know, because ordinarily, not all the women or not all people will political parties be able to consult them, you know. So for us, we see it as a point for them also influencing policy that would advance their cause. So we went around the country getting the women to tell us what they want to see, that they want to see in the manifestos, they want to hear and then possibly having the next government working on them to advance their cause. And one of the things that we also realized was that the digital space is one of the spaces where we have a lot of young women also there. And so you don't want to exclude young people. And so we also resort to the digital space. How do we make sure that in this process of consultation, we have more young people being able to tell us what they want to see, how they want things to be done and all that. And we're able to gather their views, and being as leading them, we're able to submit it to the political parties, particularly the manifesto committees, you know. For us, we're excited to see how the parties, the manifesto committees were eager to receive the feedback from the women, and their further interrogations and everything shows their commitment. And I say that I'm happy to see that some of the things that we discussed with them, with MPP, with NDC and movement of change that we met them, we see that they've started talking about some of the things that, oh, this is a concern, and we'll make sure that when we come, we address it. So for us, we look at that aspect, which is key, because most of the time, policy documents are formulated without the inputs of the women, you know, and there's the perception that women need this. We don't want that perception to happen in this process. And so we make sure that we have more women. One of the things that we also felt is important to discuss in this election is one of the key deterrents of their participation, which is violence. And so you see that this happens elections year in, year out, where a lot more women go through that. Beyond elections, key electoral institutions, key political institutions like the political parties also do some of these things to the women. So women within the political parties also do suffer some of the things that ordinary women who are not active within the political parties do suffer. And so we're taking it upon ourselves. How do we build capacity of these politically active women to at least be able to understand what they go through probably, and understand what mechanism are available for them to be able to prevent, defend themselves, protect themselves against some of these threats. And so we've been able to engage all the parties, particularly the women organizers. How do we train them to understand some of these things so that it doesn't inhibit, so that when somebody comes up with something, they don't feel threatened? Because sometimes some of the violence that we hardly talk about is the psychological one that really makes the women withdraw from the process. They don't want to be part. And clear example is what happened in Wale Wale. You know, you see, aside the physical violence that members of the party faced, there were a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of words that made the candidate feel uncomfortable for her to withdraw. So we have lost one person. She is a member of parliament, and so we've lost her based on this act. And so for us, we felt there's the need, and also we also feel the need for identifying some of these key young women that are politically strong, politically involved, politically active, to also engage them so we don't lose them as we've lost the Wale Wale candidates. One of the things that we also felt was that yes, the numbers are low. We monitored the political party primaries. We realized some of the issues that happened during the primaries. Key was the monetization of the internal elections of the parties, and that alone affected the chances of a lot of women, you know. And so how can we engage the political parties to be able to look at this issue from a different dynamics? How can they internally put systems in place that check some of these things? Because we know that the law really checking the vote buying and all that does not go into the internal party primaries, and that is why the special prosecutor couldn't do much when it was said. We saw that most of the women that also contested also faced a lot of violence again. And so for us, we are monitoring all these processes and seeing how can we mitigate the things that they are going through. And one of the other key things that we also realize is that during electoral processes, I mean, Kodeyo report will come out IDEC, CFI, and all that, the focus has not always been on women. And so we observed the limited registration, and then we came up with a more gender PWD responsiveness report, where we want them to, the police, the political parties, the electoral commission, there are so many issues that they need to address to help women feel safe at the polls, to help more women coming out freely and deciding who they want to meet, be their next leader. And so for us, this is one of the things that we are going to do. And of course, on the eve of election, we're going to still do a lot more things. 2016, we had what we call the Women's Situation Room. Of course, that's also geared towards having a peaceful election and making sure that women participate in the process. And also naming and calling and shaming those who perpetuate violence. And so we have been monitoring it. And I think when John DeMello did that to Lydia, we didn't really take it lightly on him. We named and shamed him. And okay, again, we're moving further to engage key actors. We've been discussing with GJ. How can GJ help us to manage key issues on gender disinformation that has cropped up, you know? And because it's election year, you find out that there's a more state-sponsored gender disinformation against women, because whoever has the power think that they can use it to their advantage, and women are at the losing end. And so for us at this year's election, these are some of the things that we are looking at to make sure that it's more inclusive. Of course, voter education is some of the things that we are doing. We're making sure that we get into the community to educate voters. Now the political parties have come up with their manifestos. We have done a gender analysis of all the manifestos and telling women, these are the things that the party thinks they will do when you come. So as a woman, we want you to vote based on information. So these are the opportunities, these are the informations from the parties. Choose which you deem fit. We don't want the women to vote based on sentiment or based on people telling them things, but we want our Ghanaian women, because the population, the voter register shows that 52% are women. And so we want the women to vote on issues that do affect them. So we see the change in their life when, I mean, there's a next gap. So for us, we're trying as much as possible to include them in the process, to make sure that our constituents are well represented. And I think recently President Kufuor said something that all of us need to be thinking about it. He said he never thought in his life that he'll be in a wheelchair. Today he's in a wheelchair. So the marginalized group, their concerns and issues, if it's CODEO, if it's CFI, still have to find a way to integrate, to mainstream their issues when we are talking about peace and security, because the person who has issue cannot run as fast as you can run. And so how do we all make sure that the mechanisms we are putting in place addresses the cause, the concerns of these women and these persons with disability?
Okay.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I definitely know that we will be accused of, being biased, especially because it was Esther. But I take that, it's okay. But there are a number of questions that we'll get into briefly, so that I'll have a quick turn with all the speakers for now in terms of the questions that have come up. But I would want to find out if we have any participants from FCDO. If you're on the call, please, I would like you to indicate in the chat box. And also, I would want to know whoever is online at this point in terms of who are participating in this. So I would please like that you at least mention your names or write your names in the chat box, so that I can personally interact with you as well as we go on. And if you have any questions, contributions, you have comments, please do well to post them in the chat box as well. And for the breakout sessions, we'll be getting into it after this comment and question sessions. The links have been sent in the chat box, so please, I'd like you all to click on that link so that we can get into the breakout sessions on the 3 thematic areas shortly. But a number of questions came up. Doc, I was asking you earlier about these peace pacts, the Peace Council itself, and you talked about how it came into being, and there are concerns about its relevance today, as versus the peace pact that we've seen over the period and what we are seeking to do now. I don't know if you can briefly touch on that for us, And then also the issue about violence, the 2020 violence that came up also, how it's been dealt with, such that going into this particular election, because many have said that even though we've had peaceful and credible, transparent elections over the period, this definitely was a blot on the elections that we had in the last period. How it's been dealt with. And so you can box the two together briefly for me, Dr. Dr. Akwete, Emmanuel Akwete, please, if you can just do that briefly for us.
MFA, please. Hello, do you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
You went offline when we were talking about the Peace Pact.
I was on, Doc.
They were switching us on, so I didn't hear quite a bit of it.
Okay, so I'm asking.
Okay, you made the point about their relevance.
Yes, I'm asking briefly about right now the relevance of the Peace Council. Also, the issue about Peace Pact. You know, there's been a lot of talk over the period with some parties saying they would not want to sign on to it unless there are some conditions that have been met. And it does appear that the Peace Council is trying so hard to gain the confidence of all these institutions and groupings when it comes to at least the political parties as well. So I just wanted you to touch a bit on the relevance of the Peace Council now and these Peace Pacts.
Thank you. The Peace Council is relevant, and I hope it has a permanent space or stay in the fourth republic. The reason is that if I should take it from the 6 points that the NDC said, look, if you don't tackle this and so on, you need an institution that they don't carry weapons, but it's a moral suasion, and it brings together the leaders of all the faith-based organizations in the country. And they have a way of engaging them. We pray a lot. So the other one could also be the prayers, whether you're going to the mosque or you're going to, and so on. And the politicians go to them. This sorry, haven't been identified with particular parties or whatever, and they work in collision. So I think it draws also on our culture, the consultations, you are disagreeing on it, but they come back and they are setting up processes, mechanisms, and guidelines helping resolve some of these issues. They are now all over the country. I don't work with or for them, but I am interested in what they do and how the structure has been. It attracts a lot of support because the issues they are dealing with, communal violence, is widespread. I think their intervention over the last, probably since 2012 onwards and so on, has helped a great deal in resolving some of these issues. And many of the citizens and institutions of state look up to them. The FDC goes to them all the time, even with the 6 boycott thing. Those are not things the Peace Council can handle. But the Peace Council is a convener. And maybe they need resources. They don't even have the officers that they require to do the work they're doing. So it's an extremely difficult institutional space they occupy. But they convene, they are effective in mobilizing, they are listened to, and we have to back them technically. When I say we, it's not only IDEC, CDD is also involved in aspects of the things they do, and various other institutions. Its relevance actually goes beyond elections. And they are going to be relevant for these elections because they're dealing with the vigilante violence things. They are actively in the field, mobilized, and so on. It's not just the council members, but the huge following they have. Take the Catholics, take the Methodists, take the, and so on. And they are able to also deploy them for a national interest cause. So I think it's an important institution, peaceful in its operations, doesn't hold guns or wield guns, but it needs quite a lot of support, resources, and so on, to do the work it does. It's unique in that way.
Okay, I'll come back to you on the 2020 violence and how it's been dealt with. But let me go to Tanko. Tanko, you started, you actually raised the issue about the voter roll concerns, the contestations. But my concern is also about the resolutions over the period, such that it keeps coming up. Could you touch on it briefly? Maybe, Tanko, you can wrap it up on that for us, this voter roll concerns, because we are in the middle of it now, how we can actually decisively deal with it, and not just in an election period all the time that this thing, this particular issue comes up. Tanko, are you with me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
No, I didn't get the last bit of your question.
So the issue about the voter roll concerns and the contestations that comes up every election year, like you mentioned, the resolution is the concern as to how exactly we can decisively deal with it such that it does not always rear its head when it comes to an election year. Or is it something we should just accept and embrace?
Well, I would like to start from the point of view that the contestations around the register are a symptom of an underlying issue. And to attempt to just deal with the register itself might be just applying, trying to address something rather than the underlying. And I think that the underlying issue is around the perceptions around the way the Electoral Commission works or does not work. Until we are able to find a solution to all these suspicions, every election cycle would continue to have this issue. So I think one of the issues is to have a national dialogue on the kind of Electoral Commission that we want and the processes for appointing its members and, you know, the rules or whatever it is that would guide the way it works, including its engagement with the political parties and other stakeholders. That's number one. I think number two, as I think Kojo mentioned and Dr. Akwete, is to start the process much earlier in the electoral cycle. I do know, of course, that people will come of age in the year of the elections and etc. So it will just be a matter of updating. But if we wait till the election year and start this when tensions are already high, then we are, you know, creating a recipe for these tensions and etc. that exist. So my two recommendations would be: one, address the issues around the Electoral Commission, and two, start the processes much earlier. Maybe immediately after one election, we start that whole process of updating the register, and then throughout the period, we just bring in those who have come of age, and those who have passed away, we try to take the names out. Over.
Okay. I would not want to leave our participants out of this, but I bet Dr. Akwete will want to have a bite on this voter roll concerns. And then maybe we'll go around the table also on the issue about the 2020 violence and how it was dealt with such that we will not have such an occurrence happening in 2024 as we prepare for the elections. I know that there are a few hands up also. I see you, Eunice. I see you, Edmund, and I see you, Osman. I'll come to you shortly, but I see some questions also and some comments. Maybe I'll read them. This one is talking about inclusion is good, but how do we ensure the independence of the Electoral Commission? Secondly, how do we ensure violence-free election, looking at the early warning signs perpetrated by young people who follow the richer pairs to meet their daily meals? And then also a question on, obviously, the issue of vote buying compromises the fair playing ground of our elections. Have you conducted a research on that? So Dr. Asante, you talked about the issue about vote buying and gave some more, updates on that in terms of details. There's some question on it. So I don't know, Dr. Akwete and Tanko, if you would want to quickly touch on some of the comments that have come in. You've talked about the independence of the Electoral Commission, that national dialogue that you talk about. So maybe, Dr. Akwete, should I come to you briefly on the violence, 2020 violence, how it was dealt with and how we can prevent it? Some question also came on that one as well. Briefly. Can you hear me, Dr. Akwete?
Do you hear me?
Loud and clear now.
Thank you. Thank you. First, on how to resolve the impasse on the voters register and build confidence in it. I think we have some precedents that we could look at. In 2015, when Charlotte took over, there was a situation where there wasn't, particularly on the MPP side, they didn't have great confidence on the voters register. It was a biometric register also. And so the debate then was that they were asking for a new register, but not one that probably could correct whatever flaws they suspected or had evidence on. And I think it was weighed whether it should be done, IPAC could do that, or whether it should be open to a stakeholders forum. And I think it's opened up to a stakeholders forum, and you had the late Justice VCRAC Crab. There was a lady who was appointed, and then Most Reverend assigned to Peace Council to oversee this forum at Alisa. And it brought all this vested noted interest into the room. And for 2 days, the conversations went on, and the independent leaders of the forum submitted their report. Of course, it wasn't published, but what they said was that the time was short, and given whatever quality of biometric system we're using, they thought the issues could be resolved, and that a brand new register biometric system wasn't necessary. And this was endorsed also by stakeholders who were part of it and so on. But then there was the issue of the ID card, which they raised, that it was always a problem. People use different cards and so on, and that standardizing this would be important. I think some progress had been made for that. Now, looking at the issues raised by the NDC and why it demonstrated and so on, I think the public somehow had come around to the idea that they also need a register that they would believe in, not only just the NDC, a credible register. How do we do it? I've heard ideas like they should table this at IPAC. Okay. And there are also those who are saying that, no, there have been precedents. There must be something that is not just the parties going to talk, but citizens have to be involved, because almost everybody is now saying, look, we need to have whatever needs to be done. I don't know the options that will be followed. The EC said it's doing everything to complete the register. If it does that, then maybe the next step will be for people to come in and see the credibility issues or the integrity issues that people are concerned about.
Okay.
But I think probably they'll have to resort to the stakeholders forum, because the credibility of the register is no longer an NDC or NPP thing. It's like the whole country. So I'll say, yeah.
Okay. Well, Kojo, so there was a question about the vote buying and compromising the fair playing ground. I'm sure this person may have missed your submission, but he's asking if you've conducted a research on that and how vote buying is not providing that fair playing ground. Eunice, I'm coming to you shortly. Okay, so I'm told I've lost Kojo on there. So let me bring in Eunice. Eunice, your hand is up. Please, fire away.
Very much. I wanted to make a contribution to the point on a discussion.
Eunice, may you please introduce yourself and where you're from, please?
Thank you very much. My name is Eunice Agbenyaji. I work with Star Ghana Foundation. Thank you, Emma. Yes. So I wanted to make a contribution to the discussion around what kind of electoral commission do we want and want to have. And I thought that we should also be having this conversation in the context of our constitution. I think that one of the risks to our security as a country, and not only within the election, but broadly, is the excessive powers in the hands of our president. The president appoints everyone, appoints everyone basically, and that reinforces exclusion, because if you do not belong to the political party, you are not appointed. So it reinforces exclusion, which can breed disaffection among other part of the population.
Okay.
And it also introduces lack of trust in the EC. So what I'm saying is that we need, as civil society, to engage on the constitutional review process, which has taken too much, time to conclude. And so one of the things I am requesting, which will address all the other issues around the independent constitutional bodies, including the EC, is to demand for a roadmap for the implementation of a constitutional review.
Okay, Eunice, yeah. Thank you so much, and thank you. And I've given you more than a minute, but I'll give the rest just a minute to give their questions and their submissions. Edmund, your hand is also up. Please, let's hear you. Introduce yourself, who you are, and then you have a minute to do so, please. Edmund, are you there? If not, Osman, you can take it. Whilst I wait for them, I have a question here. It says, no doubt the Peace Council is a key stakeholder in ensuring peaceful, credible, and acceptable election outcomes in Ghana. In recent times, however, many Ghanaians have lost trust in that establishment. What role can we play as CSOs to help restore its credibility? And this is from the Center for Youth and Child Crises Intervention, Ghana. And that's a comment and a question all in one there. Edmund and Osman, it does appear that I've lost you, but okay, Osman, you have to unmute. Please unmute and speak, Osman. Hello, Osman. Okay, so it does appear that Osman and Edmund are out of reach right now, but we'll try and rectify their situation and then we'll get into it. But the issue about the 2020 violence and how it was dealt with decisively, I think we did not exhaust that. Dr. Akwete and Tanko, and then maybe Esther. Esther also, there was a question for you, Esther. Inclusion is good, but how we ensure the independence. So let's exhaust the 2020 violence. And then, Esther, I'll come to you briefly on a comment on that as well. Dr. Akwete, and then Tanko, please, how we dealt with the violence of 2020 such that it does not rear its ugly head in 2024.
Thank you very much. IDEG, hello, do you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. IDEG and CDD were tasked or supported by the the European Union, to get into some of these issues, including the 2020 violence, around the parliamentary elections and the impunity in the past. Nothing was done to this and so on. So we met the Chief Justice. She had then even assumed office new and so on, and we had an extensive discussion. And it was quite a good discussion, about nearly 2 hours, looking at various things. So what came out of it was that she appointed Justice Kulendi and, I've forgotten the second justice's name. He is quite senior to Justice Kulendi. But these two had worked on how to deal with parliamentary elections violence. Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
And they were also working with the Peace Council. They come far with an ambition probably to deal with outstanding issues ahead of the elections, but there were also some practical, operational, and other issues that they were trying to solve at the time. I read in the newspapers 2 days ago, I don't know if Kojo is aware, but the Peace Council seems to say that the Chief Justice or the courts are now in a position to address those issues, possibly before the 2024 elections. So it means that the impunity that had been there for decades, not only in the Fourth Republic, but even earlier, that electoral violence is not dealt with, people are not arrested, and then parliamentary, especially the parliamentary ones, also go unheeded. It looks like the situation has changed. It's not only presidential elections, Peace Park journal that there is, but the Supreme Court is yet to announce what it's going to do. But the Peace Council has alluded to it. I read it in the newspapers, I think last week. And so I don't know, but maybe Kojo could complement it from the angle.
I don't have Kojo on yet, but Tanko, maybe you want to touch briefly on the lives that were lost in 2020 and how exactly we've dealt with it decisively, such that going into 2024, there's a lot of confidence that this will not happen again to dent the image that we have when it comes to peaceful, credible, transparent elections. Are you there? If not, I have some more comments and questions. And
all right, so just briefly,
okay.
I think fundamentally unresolved conflicts lead to more conflicts. Unpunished crimes or acts of violence lead or generate more violence. And so the fundamental issue is how have our security agencies dealt with this? And generally, there is the agreement, the consensus that we have not dealt with these challenges, what happened in 2020, sufficiently to act as a deterrent to others. So first is separating criminal acts from acts of politics or whatever. But when we conflate the two, that somebody commits a criminal act during an election period, and we cover it with the political, we look at it through the political lens, and these are not dealt as criminal offenses, then they generate more. So let's have, a way of dealing with this such that we recognize them as criminal acts. But secondly, to ensure that such acts committed during the elections are dealt with expeditiously, such that the people know that they will be dealt with. But if somebody does something in 2020 and it takes 4 years to 2024 and it still hasn't been dealt with, then people think that, oh, the next time we should also do same. And so I think that this the recommendation that I'll put on the table. Over.
Okay, Esther, there were some for you, and maybe you can have a bite at some of the issues that have come up. Then I can go back to our audience. There's one that says, I would like to have your thoughts on how CSOs collaborated with political parties to promote women candidate selection processes, and what more can be done to ensure a higher representation of women on party tickets. For instance, currently in the 5 northern regions, there's not even one female vying for a parliamentary seat. How can we make the parties prioritize this agenda? And please, if you send me your question, your comment, please add your name and your institution to it so I can acknowledge you properly. Joyce, Foley, and Matthias, please be on standby. After Esther, I'll come to you. Esther, you can have your thoughts on some of the issues that have come up.
Okay, thank you. I think that on the issue of electoral violence, I think our report even picked it up. The issue of identification is a serious security threat, and if we still are battling with identification issue in 2024, then there's a fundamental problem with our understanding of some of the basics of citizenship. Because almost all the violence in the centers, it was the cost of it, the identification of these people. And so one thing is that you don't only distract the process, but also you deter some people from coming there. And when we were doing the observation, we realized that the police are not even trained on gender-sensitive protections, and measures to put in place to address the concerns of this group. And so everybody is just pushed aside. And so if I'm a woman, or I'm a person with disability, do you want me to be part of the process, So I think that beyond the discussion, there should be also emphasis on the fact that it has an effect not only on the electoral process, but also on inclusivity, because these women are not going to go. And trust me, a lot of first-time voters couldn't register. They didn't go back. And we asked them why. They said, no, the conflict, the violent situation at the station was just too much. So the question is, how are we even discussing this, together with the fact that they've been allegedly by the NDC and also some confirmation from the EC with regards to some transfers, but they saying they have rectified it. So the event that people go to the polls and this issue has not been rectified as the Electoral Commission did mention, then what happens? A lot more women, a lot more persons with disability are not going to vote because they will be scared. They don't want to go through any violent situation, you know. And so I think when we are discussing, I know most oftentimes we ignore the women aspects and all the gender issues in it, and we think that, oh, when we discuss the bigger issue with other, I mean, all that will be addressed. But we need to understand how it does affect these women and how the police is also going to make sure that their policing would not affect the inclusivity aspects of the electoral process. You see, the person was asking about the inclusivity and their independence. For us, we are saying that to be included in the process, be part of the process throughout the electoral stages. What are you doing to make sure that your voice is heard? We don't have any I mean, our focus is not on who and how you go about it, but we are giving you the processes and we are laying down approaches for you to be part of it. And so, for example, when we do the analysis of the parties, we say that for this party or that party, we are giving you the information. Based on that, make an informed decision. So their independence is never undermined. The Electoral Commission, if it opens up to be inclusive, to listen, their independence is not undermined because the Constitution provides the inclusion of all this it's a provision, and so it has to be there. And so if the Electoral Commission has a unit that addresses women and persons with disability, definitely
I'll come back again.
Definitely,
let me take a quick round on this and then come back to you. So FLMFA, that was your question, and Esther has given you some responses to that. And Awal Ahmed says, in all these conversations, we must endeavor to avoid the danger of a single story focusing largely on the negatives. There's an unfortunate negative narrative emerging against state institutions. All the positives and behind the scenes positive work is not promoted and is not so visible. That's Awal Ahmed's contribution. Edmond says, for how long are we going to live with the problem of the voters register anytime elections are approaching? Is it possible to have a permanent solution to it so that in the future we'll be talking about the campaigns and manifesto instead of a credible register? So some way forward has been given already, and I'm sure that the media persons here have already a number of headlines. I have a number of headlines from the submissions on how we can deal decisively with the issue of the voters register. And since I have competitors here, I will not put out my headlines just yet. You can visit myjoyonline.com for more on this. But let me invite Joyce. Hello, Joyce. It's your turn. Please, you have a minute. Your name and where you're from, and then your submission. You can unmute and then fire. Hello, Joyce. How about you, Foley? Are you there? Matthias? All three of you, what's happening? You can unmute and then we can hear you. We would really like to have our audience participating. But Kojo Asante is back, I'm told. And Kojo, there was a question for you about the work you've done when it comes to vote buying and how it is affecting the level playing field that we have. So maybe you can quickly touch on it, and then I can go back to my audience.
Okay. My question is very simple.
Okay, your
name,
question
is very simple.
Your name, sir, and where you're from.
I'm Raymond Foley.
Hi, Raymond. Okay.
Member for Sempwami electoral area. If vote buying is a crime, then why do we sit down to watch our political parties practice it? And how can we stop that?
Straightforward. Thank you so much, Raymond. Thank you. And Matthias, are you there?
Yeah, yes, please. Thank you, MFA.
Great,
Can you...
Matthias.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Matthias. I'm a peace and development analyst, the UN Resident Committee's office. I have two issues. My first question goes to Mr. Ibrahim Tanko. He raised the issue of quality of campaigns, looking at insults, conflicts. But of late, we've also seen
the issues of hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, driven largely by the digital space that we currently enjoy. What can CSOs do in collaboration with international organizations to really help curb this issue? My second question is to the signing of the peace. We've heard the NDC say, I don't know, sign the peace pact. What efforts are CSOs doing to really push that effort to ensure that all the parties participate in the signing of the peace pact? And the last, and I think you briefly addressed it, when you look at the election calendar, we've really come far. There were a lot of activities there, and we're able to implement a number of them. For me, that's a positive for us. So to what extent can we also go on to highlight what we've achieved in the electoral process? Because that will also help engender trust in the process. If we keep focusing on the negatives, then we are rather increasing the mistrust for the electoral commission, the electoral process, because that information dominates the public space. Let's also make an effort to bring the positive side that the EC and as well as other actors have achieved in the electoral process. That will help engender the trust that we all envision. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Matthias. Joyce, I'm told you are ready now. Joyce and Mausi, inclusivity. Let me bring you in, then I can take responses.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Joyce Lanyon from ICDP Ghana. I want to make a comment in relation to the constitution of the Electoral Commission and going forward, how we can ensure that they are independent and that no influence will be on the activities. I just want to bring our minds back to the constitution of the EC. Some of the membership were clearly a certain party followers and did a lot of advocacy for them, but they are seated on the EC as, officers who are going to help us, including other people there that were identified as members of a certain political party, and they are now there as key people working within the IT department and all that. This brings that clear understanding of mistrust between the constitution of the EC. And so people do this advocacy for a new electoral rule. I want to agree with Tanko and Eunice that there is too much power vested in our president is such that they are able to take certain actions that will not impact on the free and fair electioneering process that we are talking about. Okay. If you look at other political parties' interest in this whole process, a certain degree of power should be taken out and then instituted in a form that will not drive personal interest, political interest. And my last point, when the NDC people were doing that their thing, NPP was saying that, oh, okay, if you have given them the opportunity to do this and you attempt working on the register, then we will also go and do, that's a certain...
Joyce, please, I would have to leave you. Thank you so much, Joyce, for your contribution. Mausi, you have the final one on this last round.
Amafa, thank you so much. So I want to comment on the...
Mausi, you tricked me there. You tricked me there. Oh. I was hoping it's a female Mausi, but that's fine. Please take it away.
yeah, I get that a lot of times. Okay, so I want to comment on the 2020 electoral violence cases that happened. And so CDD Ghana did some work in 2021, 2022, trying to track a number of the cases that were very violent that were recorded in that period within the criminal justice system. And I must say that at the time, what we found was that out of the 12 cases that were tracked, 5 of the cases were still being investigated, 4 cases were in court, and then 2 cases had been settled in between the parties, and then 1 had been forwarded to the AG's office for advice. And so the project ended, and so we could not really continue with following up on these cases. But my sense is that much of these cases are probably still where they are, and then nothing has not been done about these cases, even after 2 years after we found out all these things. And the key issue is that once these cases are not dealt with and we don't have justice for the victims in this crime, obviously it will create a situation whereby the victims themselves would also want to take up arms in the coming elections, and then would want to exact some form of vengeance. On the other hand, those who are perpetrators in this crime to also be emboldened to want to do more because, I mean, they've not been brought to book, they've not been, they've not seen any justice, and so that may create that whole cyclical nature of violence that we are likely to see in the 2024 elections. And so for me, these are critical issues that, I mean, we just, I mean, as a country, we didn't really deal with it expeditiously within our criminal justice system, and it's likely to create a ripple effect of some violence within the coming elections. So that needs some in terms of trying to put pressure on the various states to bring these cases to a closure. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mausi. And it's been touched on a bit, but of course, Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante is back online. So, Doc, there were issues about vote buying, and Fully has a straightforward question for all of us. And I'm sure that it's a question that we can all contribute to. Vote buying, he talks about the work that we've done. He was asking about the extent of the work that was done. It's been done on that, and how it's not giving us a fair level playing field. And Fully adds to that as to, if vote buying is a crime, why are we all sitting down and watching it happen at the levels that it is happening? So Kojo, maybe you can briefly touch on that, and then we can go into Matthias's concerns. Asante, are you there? Okay, so I'm hoping that Kojo would take this up. Kojo, is that you I'm hearing?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. So as I said, it was so pervasive that people just got used to it. They didn't even know that it was a crime. So that itself, I think, was an eye-opener for me. I think once a lot of these things, deterrence is when people see that somebody's been jailed for it. That would make a big difference. But I think one aspect of it is also the legal regime, because you influencing somebody with the intention of the person sort of changing their mind or voting for you, that intention part of it, you have to prove that in court. And that is also a stumbling block. So the elements of the crime is also a challenge for law enforcement. So it is something that we have to look at the law as well, because if you ask the OSP right now, some of the cases that they are pursuing, they kind of hit a block, because there are elements of the crime that you struggle to prove, because it's not just about giving the money.
Mm-hmm.
You have to show that you are giving the money to influence the person to do a certain thing. And that then becomes a problem, because if you cannot substantiate that in court beyond reasonable doubt, then becomes an issue. So we have to look at the offenses to be able to make sure that within election contests, if these kinds of transactions happen, it is almost a strict liability. It's an offense when you exchange money during these kinds of contests, then it's already a strict liability. And so those are some of the issues that I think we have to look at to make sure that you ban this type of behavior. But at the moment, there's too many loopholes that allow for these kinds of things to happen. I think once we start doing that, it will make a big difference.
Okay. Well, Tanko and Dr. Akwete, Matthias has a double-headed question for all of you on this, the issue about hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, and how CSOs are actually helping to curb this particular situation. And for you, Doc, he talks about the peace pacts and how CSOs are helping the peace council to be able to get all the parties and to be able to restore trust in the process also, and highlighting positives. I think that's for all of us, highlighting the positive in the electoral process. So, Tanko, you can take that briefly on the hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, and how you're all helping to cure that.
Thank you very much. I think since the 2012 elections, Star Ghana program and subsequently the foundation has provided support first to a number of media organizations to improve the quality of their reporting, because sometimes it is in the re-echoing of some of the remarks that people have made or people make on the platforms that tend to amplify it and then to give it fuel and then to lead to all the challenges. I think the second two has been that a lot of very good work has been done by organizations such as the Media Foundation for West Africa that has for a very long time been tracking, publicizing, naming and shaming, politicians who make these incendiary remarks. What we haven't done very well, I think, not just Star Ghana Foundation, but as CSOs, as citizens, is to take these actions lower down to the community levels. There are now lots of community radio stations. How we help to monitor and report on people who use these things to make such speeches is quite important. I think the second is also the whole thing about digital literacy, for young people, for voters. How do you identify hate speech? How do you identify misinformation, disinformation? What do you do about it? Rolling out such programs, I think for me, it's something that is really important. And Star Ghana has tried that, under our Peace and Security project in the Northern Ghana to support young people be able to navigate the social media landscape with a view to identifying and addressing this. And I think the last point I would make on this is how does the NCA collaborate with, some of these media, social media platforms to be able to block some of the platforms, pages that churn out the disinformation and hate speech, and how, because I think that is really very important on that. But it is our collective responsibility as citizens to identify these things, not to give it fuel, not to forward those such messages. And then I think the engagement with the political parties is also important, that it is not in their interest if their pronouncements lead to civil, disobedience, widespread conflict, then what are they coming to rule? So it's everybody has a stake in that. Over.
Well, Dr. Akwete, the issue about the Peace Pact and how the CSOs, you're all helping the Peace Council and also restoring trust in the process and making sure that only most of the positives are highlighted rather than all the attention that the negatives are being given. Dr. Akwete, briefly on that.
Thank you very much. Probably a very quick one. Tanko's last question about this hate speech and so on. I think we're trying to bring the National Media Commission, the Communication Authority, and the Cybersecurity Agency together. I think they are also taking these things very seriously and how to counter them. And maybe there might be the need that some arrest or prosecution could happen, or ownership responsibility, because many of the 700 or so radio stations, FM radio stations that have been registered and licensed, they know the owners. The owners too have responsibility. Editors have responsibility. So there has to be an attempt to get the radio stations and other media also interested in ensuring that some of these problems are dealt with, and particularly in the forthcoming election. We are discussing that with some of these institutions.
Okay.
Now, the NPC, I think the NPC has a lot on its table. We certainly are interested in how to resolve the NDC threat. The 6 points that must be resolved. Already there is some progress. Some of the issues can be resolved, not by the NPC necessarily, but also engaging other institutions to handle that. And these are conversations we are having. So I think we can come back fully to understand, but I think it's resolvable. They could, because you see, the important role of the Peace Pact or function of the Peace Pact is to encourage people aggrieved by election result or whatever to go to the court for it to be peacefully resolved, rather than taking guns or whatever into their hands, and we are seeing violence and all that and so on. So once the grievances have now been aligned by the NDC, I think it makes it easier to also see how what steps should be taken and what conversations should happen for some of the issues to be resolved. And it's work in progress, I believe.
Okay. Well, and the issue about restoring trust in the process, and then also highlighting most of the positives instead of all the attention we give to the negatives. How can we all do that? Maybe we can just take a quick round on that. No, I'll start with you on it. I'll stay with you on it, on that.
Me, please, can you? I didn't get it.
So Matthias was asking about how we can all focus on the positive in this whole process, such that we can restore trust in the electoral process leading up to the elections, rather than all the attention we give the negative.
I think the way it was designed, the appointment mechanism is flawed. Membership. You see, the way the members are appointed, we've seen clearly, people saw the politics in the Afarijan left. Well, he was the long-serving, but he also managed to build public trust, to gain it over a period of time. Okay, then you have how his successor took over, and then what has happened since then. So I think the political influence or the power of the parties, or when they're in government, to bring about these changes is raising a lot of questions. That's why the autonomy of the EC ought to be guaranteed by probably reform procedures of appointment and transparency about it, and its autonomy really guaranteed than what we've had so far. I think this is a very crucial thing for everybody, so that confidence is built in the leaders of what other countries have done it. South Africa, for instance, and we should be able to do that here. And it's a reform ought to be undertaken as soon as possible. Maybe, I don't know if it's possible before the elections, but maybe going forward after the elections, the autonomy of the EC, the mode of appointment and all that are issues that we need to review and build confidence in what is adopted, so people have full trust in them. And the political influence is somehow, taken out or reduced considerably. And South Africa has a good model to look at.
Okay. Well, Kojo, I'm sure you have a take on how we can all focus on the positives in this whole process and not just highlighting the negatives as always.
Yes, I mean, I think the issue for me is that sometimes we speak in abstraction, but elections and election processes are really practical processes. Since we started this exercise for voter registration, the Electoral Commission puts out a calendar, which is positive. It helps us to be able to track when we're supposed to do things, when the matters come up, and there are even issues, how we resolve it, and all of that. And we've had many issues that have come up that we have resolved and move forward. So we shouldn't feel that at any point in time we are so helpless that we get stuck, that we cannot overcome, because we have actually been through these things many, many, many times, and they are not rocket science. So I think sometimes we should really focus on exactly what is it to be done, rather than speaking abstraction. And I take this current discussion about forensic audit. Sometimes when you use the word forensic audit, it sounds so complicated, but all we want to do is basically clean the register and make sure that the register is accurate. What do you have to do with that practically, and what are the issues? And you get down to actually dealing with that problem, and then overcoming and moving to the next thing. And I think so when we reduce it to that, it helps us to be more constructive and move forward and deal with that problem, because at the end, nobody wants a political crisis. Nobody wants us to be stuck on just talking about the issue rather than addressing the problem. So I think if we take that approach of just problem solving, and even in the communication, the way we communicate, it helps, and I think that approach, I think, is better for everybody.
Okay, well, thank you. Esther, I'm sure you want to add briefly to how we are hoping to highlight all the positives, the negatives, reducing the issue about misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech as well.
Yeah. I think it's good to the person who asked the question. It's good. We need to also reflect on the good that's happening and how we can enforce it. I think, as Kojo mentioned, the calendar being out, it helps us to plan, and of course, the Electoral Commission being inclusive, issuing observer status to gender organizations like us and all that. I think that's also very good. And I believe that since the Electoral Commission itself has indicated they've addressed some of the things, I think it's also a step in the right direction that would bring some sort of a little bit of confidence, you know, that at least they are listening. You know, there's not that pushback that we don't want to listen. And so I think on that angle that's fine. But we also want to applaud the parties. I mean, I think the political parties has also, as much as possible, been inclusive. I mean, with them wanting to meet all the minority groups and hear what the positions on the manifesto development was, I think that was a very positive thing. And having them taken it seriously and putting it in the manifesto, for me, I think that's also a very positive thing for us. And now it's up for us as actors to monitor through the process and make sure that when it gets to implementation, we don't go back, but we continuously make sure that they address it. Of course, you talk about the positive, but then still the nuances still push, bringing their head out, and so you can't leave it. We want them to be more sensitive in their approach. The security and everybody, the electoral stakeholders should be more sensitive in their approach towards inclusive. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Esther, for that. At this point, I have a number of key takeaways and recommendations. I was hoping we could go into our breakout session, but the questions and comments have been very exciting. And it does appear that all that we needed to do at the breakout session, that's what we've just done. So I'll just go to you, Abdul Fattah. But before I do that, there are a number of contributions and questions also that have come up. It says, what can we CSOs do to help make the election free and fair with the use of internet? Reason being that most of the election results are collated and reported or transferred to EC using internet. How can all citizens track the elections online? That's a question from Akins Armstrong. That's your question. And Rice Ghana Ahmed Kariyama Awal says media and CSOs have a moral and legal obligation to speak truth to power on a sustained basis and avoid the subtle traps by the NDC and NPP. Defacing political party posters and other elections offenses must be called out, irrespective of the offender's political or professional affiliations. We need to update the list of hotspots, removing and adding some. That's Awal Ahmed Kariyama Rice Ghana also. That's your contribution and your question. If there's enough time, I'll just go around. But at this point, I want to take recommendations and key takeaways. And I'll highlight a number of them that has come up so far. But Abdul Fattah, as you give your comments and your question, I would want you to chip in there your recommendations and key takeaways, things that we can do going forward. Abdul.
Thank you, Mefa, and thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers. My name is Abdul Fattah Abukari. I am with Rural Engagement and Empowerment Program based in the Northern Ghana, Tamale. We are currently running a project on training young people as peace ambassadors in collaboration with the Northern Regional Peace Council and in partnership with 100% for the Children based in Denmark. During our work, we have come across a lot of comments made by people that is more or less tagging CSOs politically. We have heard a lot of people saying that he who preach equity must come with clean hands. My question is, how do we as CSOs ensure that we are not aligned to any political party in our quest to preach for peace before, during, and after the coming elections? I actually have two questions. The other one,
I'm so sorry. You used the first part to actually advertise, and I'm very happy that you were able to. We have to move on. Let me go to Kamal. Kamal, you're welcome, please. Kamal, are you there? If not, Mohammed Awal. you can take Kamal's spot. Mohammed Awal and Kamal, are you there, please? We are running out of time. We need to do this very fast. If not, let me go to my panelists on this. There have been a number of contributions, and then they're asking that CSOs, how do we ensure that we are in a non-aligned movement at this point, not aligning with any political parties? That's the concern that Abdul Fattah has. And then we can go into our key recommendations and takeaways. Maybe once we do that, let me go around the table and then take our brief recommendations and key takeaways. And then I can bring in Kamal and Mohammed Awal. Tanko, let me start with you.
Thank you very much. I think most of the key recommendations have come out from the conversations. The whole issue around collaboration within civil society, among civil society organizations on the key issues on the elections, but collaboration between civil society, media, civil society, state agencies is critical. That no one party can do all this by itself. That's the first. The second recommendation I would have is that, you know, a lot of what can be done happens at the local level. Of course, we do have strategic actions that need to be taken at the national level. But how do we capacitate, how do we support local actors to be able to deal with the local issues, you know, as they come up? And somebody was talking about updating the list of hotspots and etc. But the capacity of local actors to be able to take actions at their levels will be important, because these are specific and speak to the issues on the ground. I think the third recommendation I would make would be around the whole thing of funding the what do you call it, the constitutional reforms around the Electoral Commission, around the issues of the voters, the register. Sorry, the constitutional reforms around the cost of campaigning. How do we fund our elections, and you know, how do we get an Electoral Commission that everybody has confidence in? So those are the key recommendations I'll put.
Yeah, definitely. We'll come back to you again for the brief closing on this. Kojo, Dr. Asante, briefly, maybe your key takeaways, and then I'm sure the questions that have come in and recommendations. I'll give you like a minute or two for you to wrap up on that, please.
Well, I mean, I think for me, what we do in between elections is important for this work. And often the routine is that after elections, we all basically go to sleep. I think for CSOs, at least we try, for a lot of the institutions here, like ourselves, CDD, IDEC, Star Ghana, we try to push for the reforms that we normally agree on after the elections. But for the Electoral Commission, most of the time after the elections, the year after elections, nothing really much goes on, whether because of resourcing or just the tradition of we wait for the next election. I think if we can do more in terms of following up on the reform and doing more things in between election, I think we can really reduce the tension that we normally then get caught in after in the run up to elections, because we kind of pack everything up and then leave it very late, and then everybody feels very tense. So I would say for me, if we can focus, already we have postponed a number of things, like even moving the date of the election to November, or making sure that it doesn't fall within certain days of the week, so that it might affect religious people's religious rights and so on and so forth. That will mean that in 2025, we should actually get these things done. And then we pack it, right? And it reduce the tensions and around some of these issues that then might come up. If we want to work on the governance, the model issue, the independence of the Electoral Commission, in terms of the composition. We should do that in 2025, 2026, and then we sort it out. So I think what happens in between election for me, I think is going to be important to addressing this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Akwete.
Processes we're involved in tells us that citizens want to participate in institution building, and building, especially in the governance arena, and particularly for the judiciary, the Peace Council, and others. I think the public is taking interest in what they're doing. They are seeing the flaws or the weaknesses, and they want them strengthened. So I think we ought to understand that and encourage people to engage. For instance, if you take the issue of the Chief Justice or the judiciary, the highest court, which is one of the, I think it's related to one of the grievances of the NDC that is not going to go to court. Usually the peace pact is about presidential elections and resorting to court. Now, if you don't resort to court, it means you're going on the streets. And that could then turn into violence. But building confidence in these institutions and so on, I think it's something that we all have to raise them, probably put a bit of pressure on the institutions to deal with their own processes in such a way that their impartiality and confidence, the public's confidence in how they work, their processes and procedures and decisions are embraced and respected by all. I think it's something that the 1992 Constitution had peculiar circumstances and things were bent here or there, but changes are occurring. And for me, after 32 years, we are seeing citizens speaking about the autonomy of institutions and the integrity of institutions and the competencies that should be in these institutions for work to be done. People are a bit unhappy with what is perceived as political interference or bias and so on. But these are problems that I think will be resolved over time. But it's good it's coming from citizens.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Doc. Esther, let me bring in Mohammed Awal again. I'm told he's on now. I have Sheikh Ibn Hassan as well. A minute each for them, because once my panelists finish speaking, nobody else can speak. So, Esther, please permit me to bring in Mohammed Awal again. Mohammed, are you there?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Fortunately, Dr. Akwete has addressed part of the issues I intended raising. We're talking about strengthening state institutions. Yes, civil society organization, we've been talking to ourselves, we've been discussing these issues, all in contributing to strengthening these institutions. But then we have to also look at the judiciary. If we talk about people who have committed certain crimes, and then they just go through the process as if it is normal, then we'll find many others going into that. So how can we get the judiciary to be impartial in this so that we know that someone is there to act?
Okay.
And then
thank you, Mohammed. Yeah, Mohammed, thank you. Yeah. I'll leave it here. Okay. Sheikh Ibn Hassan, are you there? Sheikh. Okay, so I have one from Child Crisis Center, and it says, although presidential and parliamentary elections are seasonal affairs, I don't think discussions around such elections in this country should be seasonal as well. How can we, as CSOs, come out with some mechanisms to ensure continued deliberation on that? And that's one key takeaway also for Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante. Sheikh, don't miss the bus. Sheikh, are you there? Sheikh, can you hear me? Sheikh, we can hear you, Sheikh. Okay. It doesn't look like Sheikh can hear us. We have to really wrap up on this. So Esther, a minute for you, and then we can do our closing remarks. Esther. Okay. It doesn't look like I have Esther there, but a number of issues that have come up, at least the issue about what happens in between elections and how we start the process early, the collaborations is also a key takeaway. Issues about inclusivity, dealing decisively with outstanding issues to entrust confidence and avert future occurrence. And key also is the national dialogue, the proposal for a national dialogue on the EC we want and the appointments processes and how it is done. Also strengthening state institutions and supporting them same, and then curing misinformation, disinformation, a number of them. And definitely we will get to share with the entire participants and the country on what it is that this webinar has been able to produce going into the 2024 elections. At this point, let me bring back Tanko Ibrahim on our closing remarks for today, the Executive Director of Star Ghana Foundation. Tanko. Over to you.
Thank you very much, MFR. Thank you very much, participants. I think it's been a rich and engaging conversation. Unfortunately, we've not had time enough for everyone, and we've also not had time enough into the breakout groups. But I think that the thoughts and recommendations that have been generated provide inputs, not only for our actions, but beyond. One of the key takeaways here has been the fact that we need to start early. We need to start by 2025. All the processes to the next elections in 2028. And therefore, I think this is a call to action for all of us to do that. And on that note, I would like to thank everybody for joining this conversation. Let's keep the conversations going bilaterally, multilaterally, locally, nationally. Let's keep the conversation. Thank you very much. Over. Hello, MFA.
I need to. Please, can we fold up then?
Sorry, yes, we are done. We are done now. I was speaking. Unfortunately, my microphone was off. Sorry. So to all of you, many thanks for your company. We are indeed grateful. And another time, we'll definitely have another discussion to gear towards a peaceful, credible, and successful election. Have a good day, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.